All right, so we are on to the quarterbacks. A lot of people anticipate this part so they can argue and all that good stuff, but everybody likes to talk about quarterbacks each year. And so, what I'm doing this year is I usually split the quarterbacks up into different episodes because there's a lot to talk about. And if I was to do everybody in one episode, it'd be super long. So I always split them up, but it's always been more kind of random. This time I'm gonna split them up by tiers, and this video I'll just be talking about Joe Burrow. So before we get into that, though, just the quarterback position in general, which is what you can reference throughout all these quarterback episodes, is there's a lot to look at. Of course, I think most people understand that evaluating quarterbacks is one of the harder parts. It's not only your football knowledge and IQ that you gotta have, you also gotta have your powers of discernment. You gotta really know how to assess because there's so much context that goes into the results that it's very easy for people to look at results and start saying, attributing it to X, Y, when really it's because of Z. And so you got to be careful. And there's a lot of people that just aren't, good at it. And so there's a lot to think about. But I think for me, to simplify it, it goes into three buckets. Number one is the physical tools, and that's the arm strength. Your arm talent is something you're born with. You can't really, you could help things, but you can't teach arm talent. And so your ability to throw with velocity, your ability to throw through conditions, your ability to throw down the field with distance, all those things that can't be taught. And that really does set the marker for what your ceiling might be as far as potential. Because a quarterback with a strong arm can do more things. And then on top of that, there's the accuracy component to your arm talent and ball placement, which is a little more on the technique side, but also goes into it. Then number two, you got the mental part. The ability, straight football IQ. So your ability to read coverages, your situational awareness, your ability to absorb the playbook and, command the play, all those different things that really show, again, kind of what level a quarterback can get to. And then lastly, it's the mechanics of being a quarterback. And a lot of people struggle with that as well. But that's the pocket. That's the throwing motion and the techniques. That's, tying your lower body to your upper body when you throw so that your accuracy is maintained. That's all kind of the mechanical parts of it. And so for me, looking at these tiers, or really the way the quarterback shook out this year for me, there's I believe, there's 4 tiers that I'll be doing. But number one is this tier with Joe Burrow, where I believe he has abilities that I'm confident in all 3 buckets. And so he's the only quarterback on the list that I put into this tier for that reason. And so talking about Joe Burrow, everybody kind of knows the story about him coming from Ohio State to LSU and all that. We know what type of tear they went on this year. He's the Heisman winner, all this good stuff. So let's start here. There's a lot of good to talk about, so we can start there, but there's mostly a lot of good. The things that I like. So when I'm looking at a quarterback, number one, I'm looking at the arm talent, like I said, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I want to look at their ability in the pocket as far as their feet, and I look at their throwing mechanics as well. Throwing mechanics is probably what I look at, like the very first thing. And for me, I think Burrow's solid. I don't think he has, and there's different philosophies on what a throwing mechanic should look like. I think people are starting to I think people a while ago just accept some people get it done in different ways, but there's still some people that think there's a right way to do it. And I tend to lean towards that. So I wouldn't say that Burrow has excellent mechanics or anything, but that doesn't always mean anything. There's some people with excellent mechanics that aren't good quarterbacks, and there's good quarterbacks that don't have good mechanics. But something to look at. So I think they're pretty good. They're pretty good as far as his ability to throw and his throwing motion, his stroke. It doesn't have a lot of wind up and wasted motion like some people baseball pitch, and it cuts down the amount of time you have to get the ball out, and then it also makes it easier for people to bat the ball because the trajectory of the ball is a little lower. And so when you got better mechanics, it just helps you out with that. But I think they're pretty good. So from there, I'm talking about his feet. I really like Joe Burrow in the pocket. I think there's some polishing that he can do, but I really like him in the pocket overall. I think he keeps his feet active. There's quarterbacks you'll see that like the plant and they'll just stand there kind of like a statue. I think he keeps his feet ready for movement in case something happens. On top of that, I think he manipulates the pocket pretty well. I think he could get better, but this is, to me, one of the biggest things about quarterbacks. Everybody, I think, has their own idea of what's the most important. And I wouldn't say this is the most important, but one of the top three for me is ability in the pocket. And you'll see the other tiers of quarterbacks usually don't have that. I think Burrow is probably one of the best. And again, he's not excellent, but he's probably one of the best. And that just comes from being in some pro style situations where he actually has to go through a progression and everything. And it's not super spread offense where it's just like kind of grip it and rip it. And so sometimes for me, though, he's a little overactive in the pocket, which you don't see a lot, but like literally, because you'll know how people step up in the pocket, call it climbing the pocket. But I've seen him like climb the pocket, drift back in the pocket, climb back up in the pocket. And I'm just like, well, I've never seen any quarterback do that in one play. Like, so he might be a little overactive sometimes, but I'd rather have that so I could teach him to calm it down rather than trying to teach him to speed it up, because a lot of quarterbacks never get to the point where they can speed it up. So I like his activeness in the pocket. And then as far as his elusiveness, we've seen that he could be a pretty mobile quarterback. I think he's a pretty good runner. I wouldn't say he's excellent. He's not like a running quarterback, but he's also no slouch, and he also can do more than just pick up a few yards. So I think he's got really solid running ability, but it also helps, he's got good agility in the pocket. We've seen him avoid some sacks and make some movement as well. So overall, I just really like his ability in the pocket. I think his awareness in the pocket is probably the best out of the group as well. You see he senses it. He just really feels where the pressure is coming from. I feel like he identifies pre-snap pretty well, good peripheral vision, all that. But then on top of that, I think he knows how to extend a play. So he's not a scrambler quarterback where there's pressure and he's just going to break away and just take off. I think he knows when to take off. And if he's got a lane, I think he knows when to extend the play and try to get a throw off. And so I also and I'll get to his decision making, but I also think he knows when to throw the ball away too. So he can remain a passer. He can also be more of a mobile threat. I just think when you're talking about pressure situations, because a lot of people in the draft talk about how does a player win as far as any position. For me, I'm a little more specific. How do you win in pressure situations? Like when it's tough, not when it's easy and what you're best at, but when it's tough, how do you win? And I think in tough situations, he knows how to handle the pocket. And I think that's one of the biggest transitions for college quarterbacks. So that was probably the most encouraging sign. So then talking about the mental part, I really like his decision making. And you were at a point where spread was messing up quarterbacks, and they just forced the ball no matter what was happening. They were throwing it to whoever you told them to throw it to. Then you got the advent of Aaron Rodgers, and as I mentioned for years, that has started to change where everybody just wants to run around until they can make a play. So you got less quarterbacks forcing the ball to their first option, which is fine by me. I like that. But not everybody is as smart about it, and not everybody understands when to bite the bullet and not. I think Burrow is really good at it, and he has those weapons because, like I said, you think like a Pat Mahomes, you think like a Aaron Rodgers. The best thing about them is not that they just run around backyard style all day. They know when to scramble and pick up those yards to make it a shorter throw. They know, when to threaten you with their legs. They know when to keep the play extended. They know how to play the chains. And so that's one thing I talk about with all these quarterbacks is what's their ability to play the chains. And I think there were some mistakes by Burrow, but I think he rarely does like the obvious mistake. I think there's sometimes he might press, but I don't see him making like the obvious dumb choice. Like if it's obvious, I think he avoids it. And that's pretty consistent. And then on top of that, I think he plays the chains well. And I talked about a little bit about that before, but you think a lot of these quarterbacks, Haskins comes to my mind from last year, where you just watch what they do in situations where it's 3rd and 14 and they scramble for 2 yards. Or it's 3rd and 8 and they throw a 4-yard hitch. And that depends what the scheme is. They might have a play call where there is nothing deep or that can pick up a first down. And that's on the coach. But usually there's options on the play. And you see some quarterbacks that just play it safe or just don't have the situational awareness to attack the chains. And so I think Burrow, as far as that, is really good. I think he knows when it's time to take a shot, when it's time to gamble, and when it's time to be smart. So I really like his decision making, and I really like how he forces the defense to, or at least he pressures them. So you can't just sit there and spy him. But you also can't give him too much cushion, so he uses his weapons pretty well. Now, as far as his accuracy, love his deep ball accuracy. And this is one that if you're looking at quarterbacks, I always try to talk about how they miss. That's what you want to see. A lot of quarterbacks don't have good deep ball accuracy, but how you miss is important to me. If you don't complete a lot of passes in the deep ball, and they're always short, that's one thing, or underthrown. If it's always wide out of the sideline, just not accurate or close, that's one thing. If it's always overthrown by 10 yards or whatever, that's one thing. So you always kind of want to know how they miss. Burrow has a really nice hit rate, and what that means is he completes passes on the deep end. And if he misses, to me, it's always in a place where the receiver can only catch it. And that's tough. That's pure accuracy because you're talking about not only getting it far enough down the field on time, but also putting it in a place where if it's not complete, then it's incomplete instead of intercepted. And some people, they just put the ball up and it's in a position where the defensive backs can make a play. And people got to realize, like, rarely is a defensive back running on top of a receiver. They're usually in trail position because they count on quarterbacks that can't throw accurate passes. And in tight coverage, I think Joe Burrow shows that he can't put the ball where it needs to go. So I love that. His short and medium accuracy, not so much. Here's a great example of talking about quarterbacks. I think the thing with Burrow is that he throws with good anticipation. And so there's some plays where it's like, man, he put it in a tight window or a tough throw. And some people might say, well, obviously he gunned it in there. And it's like, not really. I do believe that he throws with some good anticipation as far as the ball goes to where the receiver is going to be, and it times up well. And then there's times, of course, where a lot of zone coverage and crossing routes, which is all the college game does now, I think that stuff's easy for him to complete. Now, the issue comes against man coverage, and that's the times where I've seen like he's been tested by that as far as his timing and as far as his accuracy as well. Because when you got crossing routes and then when you got zone coverage, you don't have to be as accurate. It just needs to be in the vicinity. But when you got man coverage, you're throwing a slant and the slant is behind, then you're talking about a possible interception and things of that nature. So it wasn't too much. I didn't see people play like man them up a whole bunch. But that's one thing I wonder about. And a lot of these quarterbacks are what I call zone eaters. They eat, I talk a lot about that with tight ends. They feast on zone. And I think that's what the spread is built for in college for a lot of quarterbacks. But in NFL or college, it's just easier for a lot of these quarterbacks, especially when they got time to just go through the zone. So we'll see. That's something I have to keep my eye on. So that also kind of alludes to some of my downsides about Burrow. Is number one, his arm talent. So I gave him a 3.5 arm out of 5, or level 3.5, excuse me, out of 5. So 5 is the highest. And I gave him a 3.5. And overall, I'm trying to be more strict with that because I think I give out higher numbers every year. And then you see somebody with a crazy arm, and it's like, how did I give them a 5? But I only gave I also gave this person a 5, and they're not even close. So I'm trying to recalibrate it a little bit. But yeah, I don't think he has plus velocity. I think his release is also one of those things. I don't think his release is super quick. I think it's just above average. And I don't think he has a lot of velocity. And again, like some people might say, you see that pass, like, of course he has velocity. I don't think he does NFL type velocity. I think, again, he throws with good anticipation into those windows that it times up well. And, of course, he has great receivers that have great ball skills and also help. And it's not that he's super inaccurate. It's just I don't think he has that arm talent. And so, again, Burrow's interesting when you put it all together because you rarely get somebody really strong at the deep ball. Like, usually they're really strong in the medium game. And the deep ball is something they got to get better at. Burrow's really great at the medium game. He's really great at the in the pocket. He's really a great mobile dual threat option. But yeah, I don't think he has a cannon for arm. And so that's when accuracy is going to become a thing, especially, or accuracy, timing, anticipation. That's going to become a big thing for him when you're talking about NFL level speed and defensive backs that react a lot quicker than what he's seen. Now, he's played in the SEC, of course, so we all know that. And I'm not saying it's going to tank him or anything. I'm just saying that's one of the concerns you got to think about. And again, when you're talking about arm talent, you're talking about potential. And so for me, I think that just limits the ceiling on what he can do because I just don't think his arm's going to get any stronger. So that's me. But there's a lot to like. Now, for me personally, there's also the whole thing with the OBJ thing. I don't personally like how it's handled because this is the fourth part of the quarterback evaluation that none of us outside of the NFL get to be a part of, and that's the personality, the mental makeup, not the football IQ, but the actual person. And that's huge because, again, I talked about Mahomes. That's the one key part that I didn't know and that anybody else didn't know that you can't really evaluate from here is what's their ability and their desire to get better. What type of person are they? And so I can only go off the limited stuff that I see. So the stuff I'm seeing from Joe Burrow, I don't think he's like Johnny Manziel or anything. But me personally, I'm sure a lot of teams don't care. But for me personally, when you got players that are just like F school, like that rubs me the wrong way. And of course, I'm in education, so there's that. But that rubs me the wrong way. Even if they're not into their education, it just rubs me the wrong way. Especially when you're like, oh, I'm not a college player no more. F it. I just say what I want. Like that just rubbed me the wrong way. So there's that as far as my own little flag, like a yellow flag, not really a red flag, but some people won't care about that. So all right, so that's it for me as far as Joe Burrow. I do think he is in his own tier. He's the best of the group, but people got to realize like that don't mean like you're amazing. Like people get enamored because they're the best of what they're looking at. So understand that doesn't mean you're just I don't know. It's all in a vacuum. That's what happens in the draft. It's in a vacuum. This isn't the NFL drafting all the quarterbacks in the league. This is just the quarterbacks in this group. And out of this group, he's the best. Would I say he's the number one pick in most drafts? No. Quarterbacks get pushed up. I think he's definitely a first round caliber quarterback. But I don't think he checks all the boxes where it's like this is a bona fide top 3 prospect. I don't think he is. I think he's just the top quarterback prospect. And as we know, that pushes people up. So anyway, go to the comment section. Let me know what you think about Joe Burrow. Share it around, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, subscribe. And thank you for listening.